Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We are still talking the national debt here at Smart 24 TV, where we drive your business. And I'm with Miss Nalunga Jen, who is Executive Director of Siatini Uganda, right? And we before going into the break, we broke the ground with, of course, some of the factors that people consider as what a worrying debt looks like. And we actually try to break ground on that one. But Ms. Nalunga now would like to go into some of the prospects now of the debt here in Uganda. Recently, there was a 1.7 trillion Ugandan shillings loan, a concessional, rather commercial loan, which our government is planning to take out from Standard Chartered, from external lenders, right? What do you think is the effect of some of these loans? And if you could also break down for us some of these loans. We know we have the concessional and commercial loans, and the effect of these on the economy of Uganda.
Okay. When you look at, maybe this is also what's worrying about our debt situation, is that the debt structure has changed very much, very greatly. Because we used to get most of our debt used to be from multilateral lenders like IMF, World Bank, and these loans used to be, the interest is low, and the repayment period very long. In fact, the grace period, they could say 20 years don't pay, starting the 20th year, you pay for 40 years, for 30 years, you see? But now when you look at what's happening now, that the structure of our debt has changed, that we are going for commercial, yes, Standard Chartered Bank. We are going for Euro bonds. The challenge here is that these commercial loans, purely commercial loans, the interest rate is high, and the payment period is low, is very short, and that puts also pressure on government to be able to, even to borrow somewhere else to be able to fulfill these obligations. The beauty about these commercial loans, unlike the other IMF World Bank loans, there are no stringent conditionalities. You give the money, you go and do what you want, but you pay back. And the challenge also with Euro bonds, because you saw the government wants to float a Euro bond, Euro bonds are loans which are denominated in another currency, not Ugandan currency. They call them Euro bonds not because they are in euros, but they might be in dollars, in yen. The challenge here also is that loans which are denominated in a different currency has a challenge. Take an example now, the interest rates are going up on the dollar, So that means and that's why I was saying 80 trillion, you can't know whether it's 80 trillion because the interest rates are going up on that dollar. So these are all challenges which we need to be aware of. Government is also borrowing on the domestic market. I think it's about 33 trillion now. When you look at the 80 trillion, 33 trillion is from the domestic market. That means government is crowding out business people. Because if I'm a bank, why would I lend to you, Anton?
With no surety that you're going to actually return the money. Yes.
But here, it's a sure deal.
Yes.
So there also that challenge. And another challenge with our structure of the loan, you remember, way back in that was 2012, around there, a number of poor countries requested for debt cancellation because we are really indebted. We are in a debt crisis where we are going now, where we are. So there was a lot of campaign. I don't know, you were still maybe young or not yet born. You never know. Yes. there was a campaign, I remember, the Jubilee campaign, end the debt, debt is slavery. So these multilateral donors sat and said, okay, they put in place a HIPC initiative, highly indebted poor countries initiative, and they cancelled most of our debt. Now it can't happen because the structure of our debt has changed, purely commercial. You can't go to Standard Chartered Bank and start shouting, debt is slavery, you cancel the debt. No. Either you pay or you pay.
Yes,
you know. So the prospects of our debt is very, worrying. And another challenge also is the more you get into problems of debt repayment. When you start talking about debt rescheduling, it becomes a challenge to access concessional loans because your credit rating goes down. Antoinette, it's like you, if you have been borrowing all over, smart, in the offices, you borrow from so and so, you borrow from so and so, the first time somebody will say, okay, I'll give you on this interest rate. But the more you borrow without repaying, the more they see you are a problematic borrower, the interest rate goes up. Then that's when they even start asking for security. Give me that coat, give me your laptop for security. So that's the situation where we are in as a country, and it's a bit worrying.
I want to ask you there, when it comes to the non-concessional commercial loans, you've talked about World Bank and IMF, and we want to talk about these stringent measures. It's a fact that you don't just get money from World Bank. You don't just, they will have to follow up on how you're using the money, they have to follow up on your policies. There's a long list of things that actually you have to fulfill. Except when you go to China, Exim Bank will give you a loan the day you go there, right? So long as you have something and you're going to pay them. You know that we are paying for the express highway and so many other loans that we have actually done. What really do you think is motivating government to still go to some of these institutions, the commercial loans, rather than going to the World Bank and being patient and fulfilling all these other conditions for the more concessional loans?
Because you see, why does government
opt for
go to these other non-concessional loans? And it's because we have no resources,
Well, you mean we don't have minerals? We have so many.
I'll come to that. It's because at the moment, take an example now, this is government's reasoning. They have no resources. And World Bank, maybe the conditionalities are do ABCD, you haven't done it. And that's why they go to the commercial loans. But what's coming out really, there is a very high appetite, The other time we are discussing in the office, it's like an addiction to borrow, And maybe it's because we assume that we have oil, we can be able to pay, but there is an addiction in government to borrow unnecessarily. And that's why when you look at where the money is going, it becomes a challenge. Where is the money going? Take an example of the recent loan. How much was it? Sometimes you get confused. Which loan is it? Is it the 1.7
it's so many
trillion?
Of them. Yes.
From Standard Chartered?
Yes.
What we see is that some of that money is going to be used to repair Munyonyo Speak Resort. You look at
this standard gauge railway.
It wasn't. I don't know. Has it ever been completed? Nothing.
Yes.
So when you look at how we use our resources, it's a challenge. And I want to go back to that, because you see where we are at the moment, the debt situation. That's a symptom it's like you, Anthony, you start throwing up, you know, and we say, oh, he's throwing up so many times. What's the problem? And I think when we are addressing the issue of debt, debt is a symptom of a deeper problem. And unless we understand that deeper problem, diagnose it properly and treat it, we are going to continue in this debt trap. Because we are, in fact, we are being trapped. We are in that debt trap. Because unless we strategize otherwise, and it isn't business as usual, we are going into a debt crisis, into a debt trap. Like I said, going back to my example, if you are throwing up and somebody says, you know what, we can stop the throwing up. You know?
So they give you a pill that stops throwing
to stop the throwing
Yes.
up. I would have, there's another very crude example of that, but we leave it. You haven't diagnosed why, you know, Anthony is throwing up. So even when you look at our indebtedness, there is a problem which we need to address. In fact, all these things we have been talking about, you know, that we are indebted because of misuse of resources. It's true. We are misusing our resources. You know, we can come to that. We are misusing our resources. Our administration is bloated, very bloated,
Yes, true.
big, and we can't afford it. Where we are. We are looking at where we are putting our money. Maybe it isn't in the right place. We are looking at issues around debt management. How is our debt acquired? You know, is there scrutiny there? That's why we are saying Parliament, do some more scrutiny. Where is the money? How is it acquired? You know, how is it used? Is it the right use?
I want to bring in there the issue of using the money. The president has always come out very strongly on 2 points. One is industrialization, the other is infrastructure development. And to some extent, I agree. And he has done so well when it comes to infrastructure development. We are building Lubowa Hospital, which is worth trillions. And so many other projects that are coming up, right? But is this really where you're seeing the priority of government should be?
In Lubowa Hospital?
Yes.
Take an example of Lubowa Hospital. That's a PPP, a public-private partnership. And it's there, and we are paying. And those are some of the projects which lead to our indebtedness. You know? So again, parliamentary scrutiny on where are we putting our money. Where is the money going? Because you see, the issue is not borrowing. In fact, when we go into GDP ratio, GDP debt ratio, ours might be better than other countries like Kenya.
Yes,
the US is even worse.
True. Yes.
But the capacity to repay, to sustain.
So should we be talking about the tax revenue to debt ratio? Is that a better way of looking at it? Looking at, for example, how much taxes
are we
getting compared to the debt we have?
And the whole issue is your capacity to pay and the opportunity cost. What are you foregoing to service your loan? Like I said, even if you are in a home, Anthony, you are the head of the family. You are borrowing right, left, and center. You can't buy food. You can't take your children to hospital. They are not going to school, you know. You don't even have a garden, you know. You don't have an investment, and you are repaying the loan. Is that loan sustainable? You know. So we need to look at that. But what I was saying, that the issue of the symptoms and the actual cause. When we look at the actual cause of debt, it's because the ends are not the ends are not meeting. And that's why we are borrowing. We need to finance, government has to finance its development. Government has to provide social services, health, education, water, infrastructure, all that. That's the obligation of government. But where does government get the money? If government can't generate resources internally, that's why we are borrowing. So we need.
So we are milking from a very thin cow.
Exactly.
And we want more milk
from that cow.
Yes.
And it can't give it to you.
Yes.
What do? You
have to feed the cow, probably.
Let us feed the cow. So how do we feed the cow? And this is the genesis of our indebtedness. My professor, we were in a meeting, was telling me that when we got independence, our debt was $3 million. Just $3 million. And it was for building that dam. But we also had reserves in London, building that dam. So what went wrong between them then and now? It's because of our economy, feeding the cow. We have milked the cow and we are not feeding that cow. We have fed even when we get resources from outside. When we borrow, you look at all this money we have borrowed. How much of that money has gone into agriculture, into productive resources? How much of that money has gone into industrialization? How much of that money has gone into trade to be able to look for markets?
But Ms. Nalunga, the president says that without peace in the country, we cannot have anything good, and that's why we are seeing a huge chunk of the budget going to security. And he's saying that we don't want to go back in the days of 1986 when we had wars and so on. So he wants to catch the cow first.
For how long? How many years? And when it comes to development, we call it walking on two legs. Do the security, do the development. But we are lacking that. We are lacking that. And because you see, when it comes to debt, loans will never develop anybody. They will never. You need to generate your resources internally to be able to develop. And you know what, Anton? Some debts are given to us with a design to fail to pay. Why? Because when you are indebted to somebody, you see the conditionalities, you control that control. So some developed countries give us loans, even when we are unable to pay. And that's why today we are talking about responsible borrowers and responsible lenders. We are telling those people who are lending us money, be responsible. Why should you lend a government which you can see can't possibly pay? Why?
They have asked for the money, they need it.
And one of the ulterior motive is to be able to control that country. You see all these military bases. That's a form of control. You can't say, don't put your military bases in my country when you are indebted. When it comes to UN voting, that's why you see our people, when it comes to Ukraine, Russian war, they abstain. They say, we want to vote. Because somebody has your loan there, you are asking for rescheduling. You know, you can't be big-headed. You say, I'm going the other side. So there are so many aspects of debt which we need to look at.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Lunga. Ladies and gentlemen, we are still talking the national debt of Uganda, and with me is Madam Jane Nalunga from Siatini. And so far, things are looking so good, and we are going to take a quick breather. But Mr. Nalunga, when we return, I want us to tackle the issue of domestic debt. I think yesterday's papers, they were saying the government now is looking to actually increase its domestic revenue by using domestic loans, rather, getting domestic loans. What do you think is going to be the impact of this, and is this the way to go, actually? Ladies and gentlemen, we are taking a quick breather and we return shortly. Stay with us.